Okay, yesterday we started reviewing the halachot of Muktzeh and how we moved from the Mishnah to modern day halacha. We saw that rabbi-karo lists 6 categories of things that can be moved or not moved on Shabbat. 6 categories of Muktzeh, but only the 4 categories really apply to Shabbat, and those are things that are either used for forbidden work, things that are very precious, things that are not an object or not food, and things that are usually permissible, but there's something on top of them which is forbidden and you cannot move. And there are exceptions here, but I'm going to read one entry here. It's chapter 308.3 in shulchan-aruch, and this is in the tool. כלי שמלאכתו לאיסור יכול לטלטלו בין לצורך גופו בין לצורך מקומו. Utensil usually used for forbidden acts. If you needed to do something else with it, which is permissible, you could move it. כגון לצורך גופו, what is an example of a different action that you could do with it? כגון קורנס של נפחים או של זהבים לפצוע בו אגוזים. If you want to take a hammer used by blacksmiths or goldsmiths to crack nuts. Now, if you read this after we read the Mishnah, you say, wait a second. The Mishnah didn't say that. Remember what the Mishnah said? Notel adam patish, lefatzeh bo egozim. You could take a hammer to crack nuts. It didn't say which hammer. You know, a hammer of a blacksmith or a goldsmith is not the regular hammer that you use at home. It's a little smaller. It's a little more than the hammer, right? And so, what is going on here? So, this is based on a discussion in the Gemara. Actually, the Mishnah doesn't say patish; it says kurnas. Kurnas is bigger. So, a mallet, either wooden or metal, but bigger than a hammer. The rabbi bar Abba amar Rabbi Yochanan, kurnas shel zehavim shaninu. Rav Shaman bar Abba amar, kurnas shel basamim shaninu. There's a typical development in the Talmud. The Talmud narrows down the definition of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says a hammer, any hammer. If you have a variety of hammers at home, you could use them. Rabbi Yochanan says no. It's only you could only use a goldsmith hammer because it's a small one. Like something gentle. Don't drag your 10-pound mal, from the garage to crack nuts on the table. And and now the rabbi says the kurnas shel basamim, a hammer used by perfume makers. They also needed it maybe to deal with their utensil or something like that. So they were very delicate things, and they
not to grind the dry flour.
Maybe to like a pestle and a mortar and pestle, but that boiled down to say that you cannot use, eventually in the Talmud, you cannot use at all the hammer of the perfume maker, or they call it in Arabic al-atarin. They cannot use it because it's delicate and precious, so it might break. So from the sweeping permission of the Mishnah, take any hammer and use it whatever you need at the table. They say no, only those delicate hammers, and should be not too big and not too precious. Part of it could be also because, as I said before, there was a trend of being very careful and cautious about Shabbat. Then once the idea of Muktzeh settled in, even though the rabbis lifted the ban, but then people still felt maybe I should not touch this or that, so they tried to limit as much as possible touching those utensils. And the second thing, probably because they started having more utensils with the development of culture, people had more things around the house, so they could allow themselves not to use that big hammer on Shabbat. So now I'm going to go to the end of that Saif. There are a lot of details here, but I want to go to the end of chapter 308. Has 40 sub entries, and to look at the commentary of rabbi-karo, because what he does usually at the end of each chapter of the tool he adds details that the Tur didn't write. Remember, the Tur, Rabbeinu Yaakov, wrote his book in the 1400s, rabbi-karo, at the end of about the 16th century. So he had a lot of new material to add. So he writes that. One is about playing ball on Shabbat. So I'm going to read it from we spoke about that, but I'll read it to you from the way he writes it. כתב באגור בשם שיבולי הלקט, he quotes an Italian author, שאסור לשחוק בשבת ויום טוב, בכדורים, שאינם ראויים לצור על פי צלוחית, דממעשה שמטנפה על ידי טיל ועפר, וכן כדור של עץ אסור לטלטלו ולצחוקו. One cannot play on Shabbat and Yom Tov with balls that, because they get dirty and there's no use for them.
You know, that's interesting because the Sephardic follow this and not the Ashkenazi.
Yeah, I mentioned that you weren't here, right. Sfaradim are more mahmir on that.
Right.
But he says why? Because you can't use the bowl for anything else. But when you think from the point of view of utensil, then you take something from your household to play with as a bowl, and if it's only designated for that, it's worthless. That was their mentality. It's, even some of us just remember it, and we were kids. Some of us had toys. Others, if you wanted to make music, you pull out lids of pots, and that's your musical toy. Somebody went as scavengers to a construction site, and we would pick up pieces of tile and stone. That was entertainment. But so in the time of the Mishnah or the shulchan-aruch, when he writes that, everything has to have a purpose, and there were very few things that their only purpose was for entertainment, for as a toy. So if you can't take this bowl after you finish playing with it and put it in the kitchen as a lid for one of your jars or jugs or bottles, it's useless. And because it's dirty, you're not going to put it there. Therefore, don't touch it on Shabbat. V'chen kadur shel eitz, even if it's a wooden bowl that was designated for playing, don't use it. You expand the boundaries of the prohibition. Aval HaTosafot b'Perek Hamad Beitza, the Tosafot, like Matya said, the Ashkenazi school of thought, they say that when they speak about Yom Tov, on Yom Tov, since there's no problem with the Eruv, and you could go out, so whereas on Shabbat, some people say don't walk with young children outside because they cannot walk on their own, you could do it on Yom Tov, and the Tosafot add to that, Shari Gam Tiyul, you could just go for a stroll, you don't need to go for a purpose on Yom Tov. Deha Ashkehan, de Mesahakin Bekadur, they say we see that people play ball, שקוראים פלוטה, the word פלוטה, ביום טוב, ברשות הרבים, אף על גב דלקה אל הטיול. Yeah, this is the word in Spanish for ball, pelota. So, the Tosafot say that they know of people who go and play ball on Shabbat, on Yom Tov, because there's no problem of Eruv. So the only problem that they saw with playing ball on Shabbat was that it's done in the public property, and you're sort of carrying from place to place. Meaning that if there is an Eruv, there's no problem. Like you said, the Sephardim are more strict on that, or I would call it more lenient. Those who say that you cannot play ball on Shabbat are lenient because they allow the children to not be happy on Shabbat. They say it's okay if you're not, and it's good. It's good for the kids and for the adults to do that. They can have time for that and for learning. So at the end, Rabbi Yosef Karo throws in this thing. Mi'u b'Yerushalmi perek batrat ta'aniyot matzati. Says, I found that in the Yerushalmi Talmud, in the discussion of the destruction of Yerushalayim and the whole war, between the war that led to the destruction of the temple in Eretz Yisrael, Tur Shimon lama harav. יש אומרים מפני הזנות, ויש אומרים שהיו משחקים בכדור. Says, what was the reason for the destruction of that city in Israel? Some say because of znut, promiscuity. Some say because they were playing ball. So this is a huge, difference between the two. But he leaves it at that. He doesn't say, and in his own shulchan-aruch, his legislation, you can't play ball on Shabbat. So why is it? So those who wanted to say it's forbidden, they say it concluded with that story from the Talmud that you can play ball, that the playing ball brought the destruction of the city. However, if he would have thought that there's an inherent problem with ball on Shabbat, he would list it as one of the works. But he doesn't. He lists it in the same chapter, 308, which deals with things that you cannot touch on Shabbat. So his conclusion is it's only because you cannot touch it, because it's dirty or something like that. And today, this is not how we treat balls. In a baseball, I would say that a Muktzeh on Shabbat would be the tennis ball that you let a dog play with. I personally cannot touch it, not on Shabbat, not on a regular day. When we take it with the tongues and give it to it. But the caveat with what Rabbi Yosef Karo says is this. The Talmud doesn't say that the reason for the destruction of the city was that they were playing a ball on Shabbat. The word Shabbat is not mentioned there. They say either promiscuity or playing ball. And obviously it's an exaggeration. That is part of the retrospect. Rabbis who live 200 years after the deed, and they think, what is the sin of that city? So one person says promiscuity, okay, we understand. It's not that he thinks this is how they were wicked people. Why would playing a ball be associated with being wicked or being or deserving of punishment? Because that was part of the Greek culture. That was imported to Israel by the Greeks. And for them, playing ball was not too far from promiscuity or immodesty, because it was part of the athletic games that were all performed in the nude. So they look at that, say they said they had a gymnasium where they did those athletic activities with with all the practice of the Greeks, and that's why it was destroyed. So bottom line, there's no reason to say that playing ball is forbidden on Shabbat. And even those who claim that they adhere strictly to the shulchan-aruch should ask themselves, if Rabbi Yosef Karo would have lived today, what would he say? And the answer is he would say it's okay. The only reason I said it's forbidden is because because of Muktzeh, because you cannot touch it on Shabbat, it's dirty, etc. And here's another halacha. He quotes from Tshuvot HaRashba, the Rabbi Shlomo ben Adret, who lived in Spain, 14th century. Asur laset tachat atzilav, hadavar shemithaveh mimenu ameshi. This is very rare. I don't think any of us would do it or would have done it. One cannot carry under his armpits, like under his hands, a silkworm when they are in their cocoon.
What?
Silkworm.
Oh, silkworm.
They produce silk when they are in their cocoons. Mishum de asur letaltelo, because you cannot carry it around. ועוד שבוודאי מוליד הוא בחומו ומלאכת מחשבת הוא ואסור. For some reason, Rabbi Yosef Karo filed it under Muktzeh. But historically, it's an interesting anecdote. You know that the silk was produced in the Far East, and was a very precious object, fabric, merchandise, and the Chinese had a monopoly over it. But after Marco Polo came to China, that's, as far as I remember, there were monks who came with him, or in one of the next expeditions, who were able to smuggle from China silkworm and bring it to Italy, and then they started producing silk. In one of the, it's not the earliest case that we know of industrial espionage. But it was usually around fabrics. I mean, those things. The secret of the trade. Same thing, by the way, is the story of the tchelet, the blue dye of the talit. The reason why the Talmud is so, and the Mishnah, why they insist so much on getting the right one, because there was really a competition at the time over the real tchelet, that producing it was a very, very well kept secret. It had to be produced from the shells of the murex, a certain snail, and then there was the fake one. And the difference between them was that one wouldn't run, the colors wouldn't run, the other ones would fade after a while. And the rabbi said, those who wear fake techelet will be punished by God. It was more about the commercial right than about halacha. And here, we see that the Rashba speaks about the practice of silk growers, where people produce silk. They how do they keep the cocoons warm? They would carry them on their body. That was the way to carry them on their body. It says you cannot do it on Shabbat. Now, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you be able to do it on Shabbat? Where does it come from? The answer is that intuitively, when the Rashba was asked, "Can I do it or not?" He intuitively felt you cannot do it. Asur letaltelo. You cannot move it around. Why not? It says molid behumo. When you provide warmth to it, you cause it to grow. So you're nurturing it. So it's forbidden. So this is one of the things that we'll see, and I think we've already seen in Lachot Shabbat. There are many cases like that where there is something that the posek intuitively feels which you shouldn't do it, and then he would find the category to fall under. And then last thing for today, כתוב בתשובות מהריל, he quotes an Ashkenazi rabbi, Mari Weil, טלטול השעות, carrying a time measuring piece. They didn't have a name for it yet. They call it sha'ot, hours, carrying hours around. שמעתי שכבר נסעו ונתנו בדבר לפני הרב וייפש ז"ל ולא מצאו איסור ברור. People were arguing, debating the issue of carrying a watch on Shabbat. Those are the early timepieces. ולא מצאו איסור ברור. They couldn't find a reason to make it forbidden. ואפילו אחי היתר ברור לא אמר בה לפי שנתפשט האיסור. This is a classic example. It says he couldn't find a reason to make it forbidden, but also he wasn't able to say 100% it's permissible because people already believe it's forbidden. יש לומר דעה וכלי שמלאכתו לאיסור. So we must say that it's a utensil that's used for a forbidden act. What is the forbidden act? Measuring. You cannot measure on Shabbat. ואף על גב דלמצווה שערי מדידה. He says, but wait a second, you could measure things of Shabbat if it is for a mitzvah. This is mentioned in another chapter on Shabbat, for a case where they had to measure the mikveh to know if there was enough water in the mikveh and whether things that were dipped in it were pure or not. So you could measure on Shabbat. They say, מנה למעלן דחשים מדשי מצווה, אם משום שלומד על ידו. Why? Because now he knows when to study and when to start his prayer, etc. Says he could learn even without that, so we can say that it's a mitzvah. And then he adds another interesting element: medidat hazman, lav medidat gamuai. Why would you call it measuring? Measuring is only that is forbidden on Shabbat is only with palpable objects. When you measure a certain quantity of water, a certain weight, length, then you have a physical thing that you measure. But when you measure time, what did you measure? You just timed your actions, but you don't have a piece of time that now belongs to you. That's a very interesting insight. This is precursor of the theory of relativity. Like, not just the understanding that the time is not intangible. Which, by the way, just in parentheses, I'll say, our fascination with measuring time. You know, one of the most expensive pieces that people could flash around are watches, right? But they don't call them even watches. Once it becomes, the price tag is over a certain thing, right. It's not a watch anymore. Right. It's a timepiece. Right. Why do people call it timepiece? Because you want to feel that you own a piece of time. We know the time is fleeting. Always like they say, there's no present because the future becomes past immediately. So if you're rich, you want to have, I have a timepiece, I have a piece of time. So anyway, that they say it here. It says, it says, if the great scholar of the generations wasn't sure whether you could say it's allowed, who would dare say it is permitted? And then he says, I'm not sure if he spoke also about an hourglass, sha'on hol, called in Hebrew, or sundial. Says anyway, any type of measuring time is forbidden. But as we mentioned previously, that was in the 1600s, and very quickly, those people who said we don't know how can you say it's allowed, start saying we don't know how you could say it's forbidden, because they realized the convenience of having an instrument that can measure time. Okay,
We have